to Thank You 5, hosted by Straw Dog Theater Company. Thank You 5 is a weekly panel discussion on the topic of what Thank You 5,
theater.
hosted by Straw Dog Theater Company.
Feedback of
Thank You 5 is a weekly panel discussion. Okay, yes. So, speaking of feedback and participation, I'm glad we turned that off. Let me continue with the introductions. So, it is a weekly panel discussion where we bring theater makers and theater artists from around the world into conversation about what live theater in the digital world in a spirit of gratitude and innovation. My name is Hank Boland. I'm an ensemble member here at Straw Dog Theater Company. I've been with the theater company about 15 years. I'm a teacher. I identify as a playwright. And if you're watching the show on our YouTube channel, thank you. But you might want to move over to our actual Straw Dog site, strawdog.org, and find the Thank You 5 page. There'll be a link there to what's called Mukana. And Mukana is where you can submit your questions and vote on other people's questions to sort of make the show much more participatory in our second half. You can ask questions of our panelists. And speaking of panelists, let's meet our panelists tonight. All right, Jake, you're going to start us off. Jake, you're over here for me now. There we go.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Jake Hooker. I'm in Detroit, Michigan, and I have I co-direct a devising company here called A Host of People with my partner Shireen Azab and a whole bunch of people, a whole host of people. See what we did there. Let's see. I am a director and a writer, a poet, and I also do some projection design for the company. So I'm the person that does the sort of technology end as well. And let's see, I have a PhD from the CUNY Grad Center and teach at the University of Michigan in the theater and drama department. I teach theater history and a sort of contemporary U.S. drama course and a devising course and a dramaturgy course, and they keep me sort of busy. And yeah, that's who I am, and I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to mix it up.
All right. Where are we going next? Andy.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Andy Horowitz. I am a writer primarily, also a cultural producer. I worked for many years in New York at a place called Performance Space 122. I used to curate the Prelude Festival at the Graduate Center at CUNY. I ran the River to River Festival for the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, where I had the opportunity to work with a lot of great theater and dance artists. And I founded the website culturebot.org almost 20 years ago. In December 2003, we launched. And I've been writing about the arts ever since. Way back in the olden days, I was a performer and wrote my own work and did stuff in other people's shows as well. And just always glad to talk about theater with other people who love theater. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. If anybody has any questions, you know where to find me.
All right, let's keep going.
Am I next?
You are next.
Okay. Hi, my name is Tlaloc Lopez Waterman. I am a theatrical designer of a couple of different disciplines, including lighting and projections and scenic and sound. Sometimes I don't do costumes. Let's just be honest. I've had the pleasure of working with Jake on some devised pieces throughout the years, and I missed that. So I'm glad to be on the panel with Jake, and I hope that we can do that more in the future and try to build some more shows. So happy to be here.
All right, and Lydia.
Hi, I'm Lydia Milman-Schmidt. I'm a director and theater educator based in Chicago. I have an MFA from the East 15 Acting School in London. I teach currently at the University of Chicago Laboratory Schools, which is the nursery through 12th grade independent school, and I teach the kids right in the middle in middle school. I am also the Chicago chief rep for an organization called PAL, which is the Parent Artist Advocacy League, which works to create better working conditions and advocate for better conditions for parents working in theater and other performing arts. And I am also a parent myself. I have 3 kids, a 12-year-old and 8-year-old twins.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for taking time out of like what sounds like 4 incredibly busy lives. I appreciate that. And let's cut to the chase, right? The question we always start off with. What is theater? All right. Okay. Andy, I think we have you slated to take the first bite out of that giant topic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Glad to be the guinea pig. You know, I like we were saying in the pre-show warm-up, like I've written a lot about theater. I just wrote this essay recently that people were reading, and I honestly still don't have a good answer for what is theater. I know what it is for me, you know, and you know, and I've been doing it, and since I've been making theater or being a part of theater since I was like 4, and you know, like a lot of, you know, so for me, theater is people doing stuff live in front of other people, and that's about as narrow as I want to. That's about as narrow as I want to get.
That's good. People doing stuff in front of other people.
Yeah.
Okay. Talalak, right? Is that?
Lalok. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
So I think a lot about this question every once in a while. Oftentimes when I'm on Thank You 5. But you know, I'm about to embark on a project at Arizona Opera of a new Frankenstein opera that's just been finished for this stage. And where that all originated was the composer did some excerpts, and we produced it in the catacombs at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. And it was, you know, dirty, dusky. There were spiders, there was generators. That it was, you know, very raw and fantastic for the piece. And it touched people, and it also touched the artistic director of Arizona Opera, and which is why this is happening. This was in 2018, and so it's interesting because on one hand, I think that theater is very fleeting, but that it also sticks in the craw of the souls of folks that come and see it. And so therefore, who knows what will come out of it? It may be another big production in a bigger, different kind of venue, or it may just be another piece of art or another piece of thought that somebody has years down the road. And I find that juxtaposition between, you know, a moment in time and a completely different way of looking at things over time to be a beautiful reason to do theater. And the other thing is that the design process for the show, as we're going through it, what's been really funny is that the catacombs have stayed inside of the design process, despite the fact that we're going into a production with a giant LED screen and, you know, like all kinds of insanity. But we were kind of resistant to this giant LED screen because we wanted that feeling that we had in the catacombs, and that has tried to persist through the design process. And I find that to be somehow an answer to the question that we're asking right now.
All right. Lydia.
Hi. I mean, yeah, that sparked some thoughts in me. Theater is like permeable is the word that you're bringing up. So I have a bit of a different take on this question because I teach young people. I actually ask this question at the beginning of every quarter. I get a new crop of students every quarter, and I write up on a big piece of paper and I put it on the board. It says, "What is drama?" I use the word drama because it's the name of the class in my school. And then underneath I write, "There are no wrong answers," which is kind of true. And so I have everybody that's the first thing you do. You walk in the room and you have to answer this question. And the kids are kind of baffled and they're a little bit nervous and they don't really know what to write. So here are some that students wrote down a couple days ago, or last week, I guess it was. They wrote a way of expressing yourself, a way to transform into someone else, because that was actually pretty insightful. An art form, good. One kid wrote my sister, which is funny. So then the whole reason they do this is that we focus, these kids are in 7th grade, so they're 12 and 13 years old. And we focus a lot on theater for social change. I give them a bit of theater for social change history. We're in Chicago, it's a very rich place for that. And then they devise their own piece of theater for social change about the topics that they care about. Usually there's a scene about math homework, stuff like that. And sometimes they're bigger topics. And then on the last day of class, I ask them the same question. What is drama? I put the same piece of paper back up and I have them write. On day 1, they write it in black Sharpie, and then I give them only very colorful Sharpies to write in at the end. And so I went back to one from last year to look at some of the things they said. They said storytelling, which is, of course, something that we talk about all the time. A way to help see things clearly in a different way. And these are not like answers prompted by me. I think hopefully they're getting something out of the class. Somebody wrote emotions personified. And one actually wrote a way to change problems in society. So those are my answers from the mouths of babes, real 12 and 13-year-olds who have to answer your question every quarter. I can have some of them come on the show maybe next week.
That right? Like that would be great. Like give me their contact information. But also thank you for citing your sources for your answer. It's very important. Jake, what do you got?
Well, I mean, far be it for me to take the onus from the children. I mean, that's, I think that pretty says, pretty much says it all. But yeah, I mean, it's funny actually. I asked my much older students this question every semester as well, and the answers are right in that range. So. But for me, I think the word that comes to mind is that theater is a tool. And for me, that's kind of value neutral, right? Like a tool can be used for good or for ill. And so, in that way, a technology, it's essentially a technology that can be employed in a bunch of different ways. And so, I just, so in saying that, I'm always thinking about not all theater is really, adding value necessarily, right? It's not, it can be used in all sorts of different ways. So by saying it's a tool, I think that what I get at is that there's a potentiality there for real change making. And there's also a potentiality for all sorts of other different things, right? So so that's where I am with it today.
And that's right. Like we're not carving these in stone. That's fine. Today works. It might change by the end of the hour too, right? You never know. All right. So next big question. What is theater in the digital age? We're in this digital age, we're post-pandemic, you're talking about the giant screen, the big LED screen. What is any of that? What does that question even mean to each of you individually?
I mean, I think it has affected my theater making, the pandemic, and then kind of being thrust into the digital side of things in a different way than I ever had been before, despite the fact that my theater making has been digital from like day zero, so but the digital sort of more video side of things became very much a part of my life, and so and I know that there are a lot of people that find it to be deplorable and not that doesn't really scratch the surface of being in the room, which I found to be partially true and partially not true. I think
talking about specifically theater, digital theater, like Zoom theater or some.
Yeah, I mean, so it started out at the top of the pandemic as like Zoom theater, like a gallery view, right, with a bunch of people yelling at each other across the windows. And then it went to, you know, working out how to make shows like Mad Forest and make shows that had took what Zoom had to offer or what other video platforms had to offer and broke them into something that broke that fourth wall or broke that proscenium of the projection of the camera. And then it went into hybrid. People tried all kinds of things. And for me, what was really amazing about that time is that it was innovative. I mean, we were breaking out of a mold that had been placed for many hundreds of years about theater in a lot of ways by just needing to, because we couldn't go into the same room. And when you do that, there's a lot of really bad theater that happens. But it meant that I had to rethink a lot of things about how I work. And, you know, design meetings are so different now, and much more possible in an odd way. You know, when you have a group of artists that are disparate all over the country or world that can just talk through something and sketch in front of each other, and you know, it really is a big deal in terms of collaboration for me. So what is theater in the digital age? I think it's evolving, and maybe it's evolving a little bit faster than it was before in terms of theater as a whole.
What that makes me think of is the way that I feel the theater worker is also changing. I think throughout the pandemic, we all changed our view, not of just work in theater, but all work has changed. And we are in a time now, I think because of that, where we're seeing things like writer strikes and actor strikes. And I know that's on the film and TV side, but I'm hearing a lot more conversations in the theater community about fair wages, better schedules, job sharing, all these things that, again, like you said, were not even really considered because we were rooted in this very rigid system that came down from an era when it was like all men who had plenty of money, and the doors weren't open to anyone else, and they didn't need to open those doors. And now I feel like those doors are getting pushed, and those limits are being challenged. And that, to me, because I'm more on the education side than the production side, that's where I see it. That's where I sort of viscerally feel it more than the actual, like, the art of it, is the way that the attitude of workers to the work has changed. And I hear a lot more people saying, well, I'm not going to take that job because I don't want to, you know, I don't want to ruin my life to do this, or I don't need to travel there. I could, you know, so people are starting to sort of realize their worth as workers, which is really powerful.
Yeah, I'm like, it's interesting, you know, I knew that was sort of a topic of conversation here, and I really wasn't thinking about actually digital theater particularly, or really even the digital interface. I was really thinking about, like, we live in a digital world, right? Like we live in a world that's just inundated with screens and digitality and, you know, all of the things that come with that. And so I was, so I was really thinking, you know, so my answer is, like, I don't want to be rear guard, but for me, in a way, theater is still kind of resistant. And I like that. Like, you know, the opportunity. I mean, I'm very place-based. The company I work with is very placed in Detroit, and we, you know, we try to be as community engaged as possible. And it's really kind of part of the spirit of the company. And, you know, the opportunity to assemble, and I just still think assembly is really necessary, and increasingly more necessary. And so even though, you know, like my work is our work tends to be very multimedia and there's lots of things going on, but I don't think the result of it is this kind of disconnected sort of digital feel, right? It's all very handmade and very organic, or at least we like to think so. And so, yeah, so for me, I don't know, the theater in the digital world is, I think is yeah, I guess resistance is the word for me. Like I like body, it's not that, you know, it's all like I hear you, like I wasn't one of those people that was like, fuck Zoom theater, I hate it. Well, maybe I was every once in a while, but depending on the piece. But you know, post-pandemic, and I mean it's not easy, like we all know, it's, you know, the theater, I think it's as hard to make theater now as it's been in my at any point in my career. Just there are just a ton of challenges, but the for me, the kind of visceral quality of just being together is still a major aspect of it. So I want to kind of applaud theater makers for that continued push towards assembly, I suppose.
So my mind is kind of reeling from all of this stuff. I'm trying to figure out kind of where to economically kind of chime in here. And one, just a quick thing to what Tlaloc said about the early pandemic phase, without making judgment. I think what was exciting about that, and Paula Vogel, I have been told by people who study with her, articulates this idea of like phases of culture that I think come from Suzanne Langer's philosophy about naive, sophisticated, decadent. And naive is sort of that moment of where experimentalism actually happens because we don't know what we're doing. And I think that part of what was really exciting about that moment, despite all the failure, but failure is inherently part of experimentation. And I think it was really exciting in a lot of ways that everyone was kind of like, we don't know what we're doing. Let's just throw things against the wall and see what let's do. And it was exciting. And it was exciting, like, not because it was great theater. Some people managed to like really, you know, do some interesting stuff, but it was more exciting just because everything was broken and everyone had to experiment to try and figure out why is it broken? How does it work? What is this that we're doing? They were asked, we were forced to return to this central question: what the heck is it we're doing here? So that was exciting. Whether any of the product will have value over time is to be determined. What practices will remain is to be determined. Certainly, there were disruptions in the way that we work. And I think it also gave us an opportunity to revisit this idea that people dropped, which is that all work is site specific. Like, you know, like if you're in a theater, that's a site that has conditions and information associated with it. And a lot of people, I think, have grown to take that for granted, that it was not a site. So I think there was a lot that came out of that early pandemic that we're still wrestling with, and I think was really exciting.
But I think theater makers and audience got into that.
What?
Into that. Theater makers and audience got into that rut.
Right. Sorry.
Live theater.
That's fun.
That's awesome.
My son Jacob and my wife playwright Deborah Stein.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that's the magic of Zoom theater right there. But to really quickly go back to Jake, what you were saying about the digital world and theater in a digital world, I guess I really, you know, when I launched CultureBot in 2003, you know, I'd already been in the digital. I've been online already for about 10 years,
yeah,
and was super stoked about like the internet and about technology. And I've really come full circle on that. And the value that I found about thinking about theater in the digital world is that is this idea that I won't bore you with the PowerPoint, but like this expanded field that the internet sort of compelled us to think much more expansively about the life cycle of a project, the life cycle of an idea. The notion of the meme became a very popular thing. And so where I've kind of landed is that, like, for me, theater, and increasingly, hey kiddo, the value of theater is for me, the value of the theater. Hold on.
Amazing. Loving this.
How long did you rehearse this?
Oh, we've been practicing. Sidebar, he's a brutal director. He's 4.5, and he has really specific visions for the scenes we're supposed to play. And if you don't make your mark, if you say the lines wrong, if you don't make your cue, he will ream you out. It's not cool. In our home, anyway, but I've come back to, like, assembly and presence and live, and the value in where we are constantly being driven to distraction, that the value, that the center of the theatrical value is in live human beings in assembly with other live human beings. But being in the digital age allows us to see how all of that replicates out. Like, that old idea, like, a show begins the first time you hear about it and doesn't end until you stop thinking about it. Yeah. For all my Grateful Dead friends.
But I mean, I think that, and I'm with you 100%. Like, one of the things that hit me so hard during trying to make these theater pieces with people in remote places is there's something we talk about that magical moment in the room of assembly. It's about, there's a technical reason for it, and that is about low latency. The speed of sound is the highest latency you deal with in a room, and that's the latency we're experiencing right now on this show is a lot more than that, and we are as a society starting to get used to that. And I saw that in rehearsals where the joke cadence that was happening in the cadence of that particular sort of latency that we see on Zoom. And that really blew my brain open about what it means to be in a room with a finite amount of people, and actually being able to sort of be hit by the sound energy that's coming from them, and possibly some of their spit. And so, it turned my mind around a little bit about even the work I do in a room. So it's fascinating.
Wow. So, like, so much there, right? I have a question I just want to ask as sort of a follow-up. What do you consider liveness in theater when we think about all of this? Like what is live, right? Like, is it the same when we watch, like, a national theater broadcast from 5 years ago? What is live? What do you? I think I'm probably going to guess I know what we all crave when we think of live, but, like, how expansive can live be?
Well, I got to say, like, the first thing I think of about where that question falls apart for me is a show that we did, that Jake, or a number of shows that Jake and I did together, where we made a helmet for him with a screen that had his face speaking from a previously recorded situation. So we were already messing with that paradigm in 2011, I think. So, it's something that I think it's a good question, and it's not easy to answer, but I think it's part of what we should be answering when we do shows.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo that, which is that I don't know that we have to answer the question. I think it's a great thing that we're asking the question now, and when people are making that, this is now amongst the dramaturgical considerations every time you make something. Yeah. That you can no longer assume that everybody knows what you're talking about, or that the conditions are what they are. Um, and maybe there's a way that we can think about breaking apart these questions in the construction of performances. I think about that latency thing a lot too, and I think about, like, when we're in presence with other people, our heart rates sync up. Like the amount that we perceive through breath, through physicality, like there's some sort of, increasingly, like, phenomenology is believed not to be like an isolated project, but a co-imaginative project. And when we're in the room together, like, so I think there's a latency around thinking together and imagining together that just happens faster when we're with each other. And that doesn't mean that other modalities aren't valuable or important, but asking that question at the front feels like a really important development.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, yeah, like thinking back to, I mean, I agree with all that. That's also so right on. I mean, I think it is a good question, and I remember, when Philip Auslander wrote his book about liveness. I don't know if you all know that book, but it was all about, like, that theater doesn't own liveness, right? That liveness is just a part. Like, obviously liveness is a part of life, right? And it was sort of, that was his sort of thesis, right? And he talked a lot about recorded music and all these sorts of things, that we're always sort of like navigating what is live, what was live, what could have been live, right? And I think what's interesting now in this digital age is that this is normalized, right? Like being on Zoom, having this kind of interaction is totally normal. And so that complicates what we think of as liveness in theater, and it also complicates any kind of multimedia modality, or, right? People are not, it's no longer novel. It's not in that experimental phase anymore, I don't think, even though people are doing lots of wild, crazy things with it. And so, which for me, I think is really exciting, actually, because it really makes you kind of go back to basics and think about really that maybe liveness isn't really the question. Maybe connection is the question, or communicate, just like basically communication. How am I communicating my ideas? What does it mean to record something versus presenting it live? What does it mean to put somebody on video versus having them embodied, having them embodied live in some other country versus right in front of us, recorded, whatever. Am I faking it or am I not faking it? All of those sorts of things. And to me, that's sort of a gift, because it makes us think about brass tacks again.
I wonder if the specialness of, like, live, as in we are sharing the same air, right? That meaning and that feeling. Is it becoming more rare? Is it becoming more special? Is it becoming just a different category of experience altogether? Yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to think through the question of what I think we need to expand our vocabulary. That's what I think.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think that's right.
Differentiate among all these different ways of telling stories, right?
Yeah. I mean, on some level, it's sort of a post-discipline question, right? Like, does digital performance and just digitality in general kind of make us have to rethink the discipline of theater? And are we, ultimately, maybe, I don't know, this is probably a ignorant thing to say, but are we just moving beyond a consideration around what these genres are, what these disciplines are, because space is expanding, like space is literally expanding, but
I think it's contracting again.
What's that?
I said I think it's contracting again, actually, but I'm not. No, I have no idea.
Well, I'm
but I something popped up for me when you were speaking, and I'm like, I don't know anybody that like, it's an interesting question, but like as an artist, and like right now my discipline is writing, right? That's my creative practice. And it, but I did used to make performances and I still think about doing it from time to time. And I think my desire to make what I want to make is not actually affected by the technology.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like it's an interesting set of questions. And if I were the sort of artist that, if I was an artist where technology was an interest of mine, then I would want to be thinking about these questions in my making. But I think people need to make what they want to make and what they're moved to make. And I think that like starting from a place of curiosity and inquiry, like if you're a clown, then make clown. If you're a kitchen sink drama person, then be a kitchen sink drama person. Like do whatever it is that calls out to you. And then like if a question about technology or liveness comes up somehow, or if you think there's a value to be added to like introduce that question, then go for it. But I feel like starting, this is the thing that now that I'm a million billion years old, I feel like I've seen time and time again, people start with this, like the toys or the technology or here's this gizmo, what can we do with that? And then they lose sight of what they were trying to do in the first place. So I just would offer that, like, as someone who, as anyone who might be listening or anyone in the room, like, make what you want to make. Try and say what you want to say, right? And it's hard to hold on to that guide in a world with so many forces pulling at you to do what's popular, to do what's whatever. So.
Okay. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go to some questions. Okay. And Lydia, I'm gonna ask you a question. Okay. So I want you to be prepped.
I'm not ready.
Of course not. So I'm gonna vamp a little bit while I even ask the question. Okay. Here's one I want to ask from Manuel Ortiz in Chicago. Theater explores all five senses. What is your favorite expression of theater that touches all five? We're all going to have to answer this, so don't think that she's the only one on the hot seat. But what do you got? Is there a piece of theater that you can think of, or an expression? What is it?
It touches all five senses.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, it all does. Every piece of live theater I've ever seen, even if I'm watching National Theater, at home, it is touching all five of your senses. Like, you remember the feeling of the theater seat when your back starts to hurt toward the end of Act 1. You can smell every theater has a smell. I love it. I love theater smells. I don't really know how to answer that question. I mean, I think is whoever asked the question asking, like, intentionally affecting five senses, or as an audience member? I don't know. I think they're all tied up in your memory as an audience member, in the way that when you go and see a play, you can't not think of it from the seat that you were sitting in, or at least I can't. I don't know, maybe I could stretch my brain that way. But I remember going to see whatever play, and I remember where I was sitting, because that's the visual memory that I have. So maybe that's the strongest. In the same way that I don't know that I can separate it out. That was an incoherent answer to a very difficult question. So thank you for picking on me.
No, it was incredibly coherent, right? It was that. No. Jake, you got thoughts on this?
I don't know. That's a hard question. I mean, I like, I'll offer this. I'll offer this anecdote.
We didn't invite you to a softball game, folks.
I'll offer this anecdote. I was recently in Edinburgh. I hadn't been at the Fringe. I hadn't been in a long time. My partner and I just went and saw some work. And I'm not going to throw this particular company under the bus, but people that know stuff in Edinburgh will probably figure it out. There's a particular company that does totally, you go into like a trailer, and it's entirely dark, and it's an entirely sonic experience, right? and you just listen to it. It's just sonic. It's just that feeling and the feeling of being sightless. And I'll tell you what, it was not my bag. It was not my thing, and largely because the storytelling wasn't very good, right? And so I guess my answer, and I feel like I'm becoming more conservative or something. But now I'm sort of like, if the story is not there, it sort of doesn't matter what senses you're exciting, right? Because the technology was amazing, like the sonic stuff was incredible, but I didn't care because the storytelling wasn't there. So I guess my answer is really, it doesn't, like, I sort of back to what Andy was talking about, right? The bells and whistles and the gizmos, and I'm a gizmo person. I love a gizmo. Is only going to be really useful if the story you're telling and the ideas you're communicating are there. So yes, theater is sensory, but I think ultimately it's internal. I mean, for me, it's an internal. It's like, is it exciting my externals, right? So like the sensory things to me is actually a conduit for what's happening in my imagination, what's happening in my heart, what's happening in my gut. Is that an answer?
They're all answers.
Yeah,
They're all answers. There's no
Definitely
wrong
an
answer. Yeah.
I would have to agree. I would have to agree with Jake that it's a bidirectional process. You watch some beautiful image on stage, you hear an amazing phrase, you feel the particularly hot air that's from bad air conditioning, or you're outside and you get wind across your face, but all of that is combining to create something inside of yourself, a reaction or memory, and then it's not like sensory by itself is worthless, right? You have to be able to connect to the actual memory and emotional track, and even instinctual and fear and revelatory reaction of yourself as you watch the piece. And so I think it has to be bidirectional.
Andy, thoughts?
Yeah, lots of them, but I'll try and keep it. I'll try and keep it quick. One, just one. There's this phrase that has been going around for a while now, immersive theater, and it makes me absolutely crazy because reality is immersive. Like, we're constantly immersed in reality. There's no such thing as like something that's not immersive. That's absurd. To the point of all five senses, like, and what Lydia and everyone's been saying. Two specific examples of smell stuff in theater that, one, Romeo Castellucci had a piece that I don't remember the name of. It was about aging. I saw it at Montclair, and towards the end, the house started to smell like shit, and it was gross. And I didn't realize that it was part of the show for a while. A much more moving example, a bunch of years ago, I was in Edinburgh, and Lois Weaver and two of her collaborators made a show called On the Scent. And it was in an apartment in some flats in Edinburgh. And you went from room to room, and they gave you different experiences, and they told you different stories. And I was sitting across from Lois, and she's telling the story, and she lights up a cigarette, and it was the smell of perfume called Shalimar and Benson and Hedges 100s and Aquanet. And that was what my grandmother smelled like. And I was in tears. I was in tears because I had not smelled that smell since my grandmother died. And I was just gutted. And the story I'm sure she was telling was great, but anyway, so yeah, all five senses all the time. And you never know what's going to happen in the audience.
Wow. All right. All right. Question number 2, Jake, we're going to you. I know, right? All right. Dollar values have doubled. No, they haven't. There's no dollar values. It's theater. All right. So I'm looking at these questions, and I'm gonna take this one from Asia Singletary in Chicago. Also, what's your most favorite and least favorite part of theater?
Wow, that's
Yeah.
a good question.
As you think about the answer, I'm just going to say that every week we ask our guests to also contribute forward and make sure they're asking questions for future panelists. So you can pay this forward. So what are you thinking?
Oh,
Most
wow.
favorite, least favorite?
My most favorite thing about theater, you know, I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's mysterious quality. I think that I think the maybe my favorite and least favorite is the same thing, which is that the effort to communicate complex ideas to, like, whatever, however many people there are in the room, all those individuals, deeply communicate complex ideas to a bunch of individuals that are also a group. Like, the complexity of that is something I love and that I fail at all the time. And so I'm going to cheat and have that be both my favorite thing and my least favorite thing. Because I think it's just a problem that I've just been dealing with, and I think everybody has to deal with, right? That makes work.
Andy.
My most favorite thing about theater is the smell of a 99-seat black box theater in January with a full house of people with snow melting on their boots and their wool scarves getting crumpled behind them in their chairs waiting for the curtain. And my least favorite thing about theater is all the BS business nonprofit administration crap that gets in the way of the beautiful stuff.
Awesome. Andy, you're a romantic.
And a realist. Both a romantic and a realist at once.
Wow. All right. Talala, what do you got? Most, least?
Well, there's a couple directions I want to go here. One is one of my absolute favorite things is the collaborative process, but maybe because I'm a designer, I just love the circle of people sitting around trying to mull over a way to tell a story or make an event or make a happening or whatever it happens to be that we're working on. And the tug of war that happens between ways of thinking, ideas, intentions, and then the results that are not that are greater than any particular part. And then I was kind of a more flip answer, but I think is pretty honest, is my favorite is the final rehearsal, and my least favorite is opening night.
My least favorite is second night. That's the worst.
All right. Lydia.
Yeah, well, I'm a director, so like the worst is sitting in the back of the audience at any performance. But okay, all right, best. I kind of have two, but they're related. So, just like that buzz and that like spark. There's like a spark and a buzz that happens when you're in rehearsal, when you're collaborating, or if you're in a design meeting or production meeting, where like there's just a click of an idea. You all know what I mean. That's the best feeling in the world, and I think that's what keeps me coming back to theater in any way, because I've had that like click moment with kids, I've had that quick moment with professionals, and all everywhere in between. I also I love the challenge of putting impossible things on stage. At any time, it's like, how are we gonna? There's no way. That's like, yes, that's put me in, coach. Like we're gonna solve this problem. and that collaboration that has to happen to make all of that possible is my other favorite. Other than sitting in the back of the theater, I think my least favorite thing is I had something and now I've totally forgotten what I was going to say. It was very, very profound and insightful though. It's gone. It's totally gone. It's the opposite of the quick.
The impermanence of theater, right? There we go.
No, I love the impermanence of theater. That's one of my other favorite things about it. Oh, I love strike. I love tear it down. Tear it down. I love an empty theater and the endless possibilities that are contained within it is yeah, build it up, tear it down over and over. That's why I could never be an actor. I couldn't do the same thing night after night after night after night.
Awesome. That's a great segue. I'm going to switch the next question that I was going to ask and ask this. If there was some other function in theater that you could do that's outside of your own, I'm going to try to figure out who asked this because now I'm off into paraphrasing. What would it be? A different role, right? Like I identify as a writer and I can't even imagine ever acting. But I might consider designing, sound design, for example. So, Andy, what are you thinking about that?
I don't, I think I'd love to, I'd love to direct. It's something that I really have done very little of. And I used to love acting, but I feel like, that ship's long sailed. But someone called me up and I didn't have to audition, I would do it.
Okay.
I'll keep that in mind.
You're hired. Talalek, is there something else? And by the way, this was a question submitted by Carissa Myers here in Chicago. So
yeah, I mean, being here with Jake is bringing up all kinds of memories because there was a moment where Jake and I had a conversation that made me super, super, super angry.
Not just one.
Because he asked me, he says, is it hard on you to not do generative theater? And I got really mad and upset. But then I walked through Manhattan for an entire day, I think 89 blocks or something like that, and just fumed and thought about it. And it was really generative for me because I realized that everything I was walking through was some form of collage, that there were fonts everywhere from everywhere. There was trademarks. It was just there was nothing sort of singular design voice in anything I was looking at. And so I asked Jake, I'm like, well, I think I kind of understand why you asked that question now. And I was wondering, could I co-create the next piece that we do together? And it was a really hard thing to do. And it was, something I'll never forget. And so I'd like to do more of that.
Lydia.
Yeah, as you put it, I self-identify as a director. I have also done design, mostly lighting design, and a smattering of other things. The one thing that I have never tried and I find completely terrifying is writing. And it makes me want to try it, but also I find it completely terrifying. And it's going back to what Talal was saying about like being the initiator of a work, whatever that means, is a very exciting prospect. But having other people say words that I wrote sounds really scary.
Is it my turn?
It is. It is.
I mean, I love Tlaloc. We remember that conversation slightly differently, but we won't unpack it now. The only thing I've never done in the theater is lighting design. In part that's because it started by, Tlaloc was like my earliest lighting designer, and I have a great lighting designer here, and it's a skill set I do not have. But the real answer is, I have not, my 25-year career, like, really hardly ever worked on somebody else's thing. Like, it's almost always been my thing. And so having the experience of, or, the skill set really to interpret other people's visions is actually something that's is super intriguing to me, because it's just not my like normal mode. So that's the flip side of Tlaloc's point.
All right. Okay. So another question from Carissa here in Chicago. If you could go back in time and make theater in any era, when would it be and why? That one's going, I think, to, who's that one going to? Tlaloc.
I'd like to be in the room. So that's a really hard question. I think about like the Schiller Theater in Berlin and Brecht, like having the painting essentially politically making incredibly powerful statements at the risk of death is something that I don't know if I would like, but I think I would be interested in experiencing.
And you may get that opportunity.
That's right.
It's dark.
Lydia.
Well, an era that I'm sort of have a recent-ish obsession with is the Federal Theater Project, and Hallie Flanagan is my like American theater history hero. And so I think the sadly short-lived but enormous scope of that work is so exciting. And knowing that there were interconnected projects that were going on all over the country, reaching, I think millions of people, going and doing performances and for free in places that didn't otherwise have access to theater, going back to the, that idea. But I find it very exciting. And if I could go back in time and like not cut off funding from the federal government, what if I could go back to, I think, 1939, if I don't know my theater history, like what could have happened, what would be different, and if we could have like an alternate history where like that was the basis of the American theater that we have now, instead of what sort of happened later with the regional theater movement. I don't know, very exciting time.
Brilliant. All right, Jake.
I liked Lydia's answer a lot. And Tlaloc, both those are good answers, but I'm gonna just be a jerk and say no. Like, I wouldn't take that bait. As fucked up as it is today, we're in many cases we're doing better than we have historically in terms of opportunities for folks that don't look like most of us on this screen. And so I would just say, like, I don't know. I think it's a dangerous proposition. So I would like to, I don't know. Can I go into the future?
I was going to say, Jake, is there something you did last week that you'd like a redo on? Maybe that, right?
Fine. That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair. You say we don't have to get in the Wayback Machine. It's okay. I think that that's great.
I think it's a serious answer, actually. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we can learn, and yes, but and I will take a federal theater project for the 21st century now, please. Now, I'd like that now. That's my answer. Final answer.
Love it. Love it. Andy.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, what I'd love to be making future in the theater in the future. But if we're going, I'd like to be making theater. That last question really sparked my imagination. Like, I'd like to be making theater now, personally. I haven't made it in a long time. And I'd like to be making theater now. But if I could go back into the past, for years, I wanted to be in the open theater. I was like, that would be the coolest thing ever. And from what I heard from the folks in the Talking Band, it was just as cool as I've heard. But I'd also love to be part of the Yiddish theater in the early Soviet Union, with sets collaborating with Chagall. That'd be bonkers. Like, there's just so many eras. How could you pick just one, So.
All right. One final question, then we're going to move to thank yous and book recommendations, right? So this is the final question. This comes from Shannon Hogue in Chicago. Is there a piece of art that everyone should see? Is there a piece of art that everyone needs to see? I've sort of lost track of who I've been asking questions of. I feel like I'm going to have to land that one on Lydia to start.
That's fair. That's fair. Can I just answer no?
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, Shannon. I know, Shannon. Hi, Shannon. I mean, I just feel like one piece of art for everybody. I think that everybody should see art. Yes, theater and otherwise, as much art as wherever you can get it. But is there one piece of art that's going to absolutely speak to everyone? Probably not. Like, unless you're Beyonce or Taylor Swift, like, you don't. It's not. I mean, maybe there's no sense, but I don't know. No, it's my answer.
Wait. Did you just slightly advocate there that everybody should see Taylor Swift? I'm just
No. I said
okay.
I said unless you are Taylor Swift or Beyonce, I don't think that there's any art that's going to get that widespread appeal. I mean, if that's your thing, absolutely go for it.
Okay. Jake, piece of art that everybody needs to see.
I'm glad somebody else said it first, because I feel like I've been the naysayer. But I just can't imagine. I mean, wouldn't that make it a not that great a piece of art? If everybody is going to enjoy this one thing, that seems very soft to me. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think so. I can't imagine a piece that needs to appeal to literally everyone. My thoughts about Beyonce and Taylor Swift notwithstanding.
Andy.
I'll change the question a little bit, but I'll answer it. Yeah, there is, for every human being out there is one work of art that they must see.
Ooh, that's what makes
and I can't say what that is, but I hope you find your art that you need to see. You'll know it when you find it.
I'm just going to sit in that answer for a minute because that was great. Talalik, what do you got?
Well, I mean, I have a little bit of a leg up because I got to hear all of your great answers ahead. But I think I would say that everybody should see the making of art. That, the process, watch somebody paint, watch somebody sculpt, watch somebody work on something, make, in a rehearsal, the process. And maybe the next time you look at an actual piece of art that somebody prescribed that everybody has to see, maybe you could understand a little bit more about it for yourself.
All right. All right. Well, that's amazing. Thank you all. I'm going to go through some thank you notes, but be thinking about we're going to come back to you in just a hot second. So thank you, number one, to Kyle Hammond for creating and producing the show. Thank you, number two, to officehours.global, Edwin Ruiz and Mondo Machine for helping make this possible. Thank you, three. The show's made possible by Straw Dog Theater Company and its ensemble members. I'm an ensemble member. Straw Dog Theater is run on a free theater model where our productions are available to anyone and everyone free of charge. We can only do this with generous donations from our community. So you can find information about that, donating, becoming a Straw Dog sustaining member, and continuing to support our work at strawdog.org. Thank you to all the folks who view, ask these questions, tune in, and support the show with donations and with questions and engagement and sharing. And finally, thank you, five, to these amazing panelists. Thank you so much for your time and your energy and your thoughts and your passions. Okay, we are going to do a final round here on a book, a craft book, a play, a novel, something. What's something that's engaging to you that you want to recommend to people? We're going to go, just like we started, we're going to go with Jake and go around.
Oh gosh. Oh, I'm like underprepared for this segment, but I'm actually genuinely curious. Can I know? Oh, I have the blurred background. It doesn't work. Do you all know this book?
Hold it next to your face.
We're all Chicago people. So do you know this book, Makeshift Chicago Stages? Is that a book that's in the ether out there? Because it's an excellent one that I've been making my way through. Makeshift Chicago Stages edited by Megan Geiger, Stuart Hecht, and Jasmine Mahmood. So that's one. And then the other one that I was thinking of is a book called Why Do Actors Train, which is new from my friend Brad Krumholtz, about actor training and sort of like kind of a philosophical treatise on actor training. It's pretty interesting. I'm not a person who invest deeply in actor training, to be totally honest, and so it's been interesting and revelatory for me to read that. So those are my two kind of academic-y craft books.
Fantastic. Andy.
Yeah, I don't read a lot of craft books or theater books that often these days. But if I were to recommend one, Shani Anilo wrote a really good book called Method Acting and Its Discontents that I thought was really fantastic. And a non-theater book that I highly recommend is and I had a pretty reading full summer, but there's a book called Why Fish Don't Exist by Lulu Miller and from NPR science show, and it's an amazing sort of memoir / history of taxonomy in America. I don't know, it sounds kind of dry, but it's very, very amazing, and you will also learn why fish don't actually exist, which is pretty amazing. So Why Fish Don't Exist by Lulu Miller. It's a trick of taxonomy.
All right. Talala.
I'm going to recommend a book that's not a theater book at all, but I think it is super interesting in a sort of fractalian way, as we had this pandemic and things shifted for the theater industry a lot. And this is about how around the time of Columbus, 1493, the world changed in the way it traveled. And so the flora and the fauna was completely changed. The way in which ideas moved around completely changed. And so it's called 1493, Uncovering the New World Columbus Created, which I'm not sure I love the title. but I love the book. And it's Charles C. Mann, by Charles C. Mann. He also wrote 1491, which I think speaks more about the before times. And for me, it shook my world a bit, because it made me understand amazing little details, like we didn't have earthworms on this continent before the Europeans came. And yeah, and that all of the gardening and food curation by the Native Americans was the soil was nitrogenated. I don't think that's exactly the right word, but by fires. And so, because when the Europeans came here, they couldn't see fences, they didn't understand that this was actually agriculture. They thought it was just jungle and fires. And so that idea of like not being able to see what's there and what's working, because you have a whole different idea about it, was pretty mind-blowing. So I highly recommend this one.
Wow. All right. Lydia.
So I came in tonight prepared to give a kind of, not a non-answer, but a kind of a cheat of an answer to this question, because I couldn't think of a theater book that I'd read recently. And that is, I have been spending a lot of time volunteering at the library in my kids' public school, because their librarian got taken out of the library to be moved to a teaching position a couple years ago. So it's been parent volunteers running this library. And so we got a huge shipment of books in this summer, which has been great. And as I've been helping to sort of like process them and find their call numbers and label everything, I just am thinking, wow, like these books are so much more sophisticated and than when I was my kids' age, and are about real things, not just stories. They're about things like social justice. They're about racial identity. They're about queerness. They're about all these amazing topics. And I thought, I'm just going to start bringing one home. Like every time I come volunteer, I'll just take a book that looks interesting. So I've been reading a lot of middle grade fiction, and it's amazing. Some of it is so, so good. And it feels weird sometimes as an adult to be reading books about teenagers, but it's been really great, and it's given me some insight. I think also because I have a kid who's the age who is also reading this kind of stuff. We've even read some where we like read the same book and talk about it. Also highly recommended. So that was my sort of non-answer that I'm also thereby sneaking in, so I get two. Sorry. But then the question earlier about your era in in theater history that you would go back to, I just leaned over because she's always at my fingertips and found my biography of Hallie Flanagan, A Life in the American Theater, written by her daughter-in-law, Joanne Bentley. Fantastic. Highly recommend. I don't know if Andra still has this, but if you can find it, you might be able to find a used copy. It's an excellent read.
All right. Fantastic. On behalf of Straw Dog, on behalf of our viewers, all of our folks, thanks to the four of you again so much for your time. This has been great. It's always wonderful. We're going to wrap up the show. You all just sort of stay where you are. But hey, folks, thank you so much. We'll see you next week with a whole nother panel, some of the same questions, but completely new answers. Thanks so much for tuning in.